The Bloodfang drifted through the void like a shadow given form, its obsidian hull drinking in the starlight until nothing remained but darkness. Captain Korthak stood motionless on the bridge, his 7-foot frame wrapped in bioengineered muscle and scales that could deflect most energy weapons. His yellow eyes, designed for hunting in perpetual twilight, studied the distant research station with predatory patience. Thermal scans show minimal life signs, reported Veltar, his second in command. Her claws clicked against the console as she filtered through the data streams. 12 humans total, standard security grid outdated by at least 5 cycles. Korthak's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a creature capable of such expressions. The Kethavar had been bred by the long-dead architects to be perfect killers. No mercy, no hesitation, no capacity for anything beyond calculated violence. They were living weapons wrapped in flesh, and they had never failed a contract. Time to breach? His voice carried the harmonic undertones that made most species' nervous systems seize in primal terror. 17 minutes, until we reach optimal insertion distance, Veltar replied. Behind them, 10 other Kethvar prepared their equipment with mechanical precision. Each warrior could tear through a dozen armed soldiers without sustaining meaningful damage. Against civilian researchers, they would be unstoppable. The contract had been simple enough. Eliminate all witnesses to classified xenobiology research. At remote station Omega-7, the human corporation paying them hadn't specified what the research entailed, nor did Korthak care. Humans were soft, slow, and laughably fragile. Their one advantage was their unpredictability, but even that wouldn't save them from genetically perfect predators. Captain, Drakvin called from the weapons station, his scarred hide bearing testament to 1,000 successful hunts. Long-range sensors detect an anomaly in the station's biolab section. Energy readings suggest active genetic manipulation equipment. Irrelevant, Korthak dismissed. We destroy everything, leave no traces. But something nagged at the edges of his consciousness, a feeling he couldn't identify because his species had been denied the capacity for such abstract thoughts. The sensation was like hunger, but directed inward rather than toward prey. He pushed it aside. Feelings were flaws, and flaws got warriors killed. The Bloodfang sealed itself into stealth mode as they approached the station. Korthak watched the human structure grow larger on their screens, a cluster of interconnected modules spinning slowly in the empty dark. Lights flickered in some sections, while others remained black. It looked wounded, vulnerable, perfect for hunting. Breach positions, he commanded, and his pack moved with fluid synchronization. They sealed their environmental suits and loaded their weapons. Not that they needed them. Kethavar claws could slice through most armor, and their enhanced strength could crush human bones like dried wood. The cutting beam carved through the station's hull with surgical precision, creating an entry point that bypassed all security systems. They flowed inside like liquid death, spreading through the corridors in perfect formation. Emergency lighting cast their shadows in twisted shapes along the walls. Korthak paused, his enhanced senses analyzing the environment. The air carried, sense of fear and desperation mixed with something else, something that made his genetic programming stutter for just a microsecond. It smelled like protection. Defensive pheromones released by mammals guarding their young, but that was impossible. Humans were prey animals. They fled or died. They didn't guard anything. First section clear, Veltar reported through their neural link. No contacts. Second section clear, added Morketh from the residential area. Evidence of hasty evacuation. They moved deeper into the station, following the concentrated life signs toward the central research hub. The readings showed 2 humans in the biolab, 1 adult, 1 juvenile. Standard elimination protocol would be to kill the adult first, then dispose of the offspring to prevent future complications. As they approached the lab's sealed entrance, Korthak felt that strange internal sensation intensify. His claws extended, involuntarily but not in preparation for violence. They extended like a creature preparing to shield something. The thought was so alien to his nature that he nearly stumbled. "Sir?" Veltar's concern rippled through their shared link. Your vitals are fluctuating. Proceed, he growled, forcing his claws to retract. Whatever malfunction his systems were experiencing, it would not interfere with the mission. They breached the biolab door with controlled explosives, smoke and debris filling the chamber. Through the haze, two figures huddled near the far wall, a human female in research clothing and a small male child who couldn't have been more than 8 cycles old. The woman, Dr. Yunji, according to the station records, positioned herself protectively in front of the boy. But what froze Korthak's predatory instincts wasn't her defensive posture. It was the child's. The boy, despite being barely tall enough to reach the woman's waist, had placed himself between her and the Kethvar warriors. His small hands shook with obvious terror, but his voice carried steady determination. Please don't hurt Dr. Yunji. She helps sick people get better. For the first time in his engineered existence, Korthak hesitated. The silence stretched like a held breath. Korthak stared down at the human child, Ho-Jin, according to the station manifest, whose impossibly small frame trembled with fear, yet refused to yield ground. The boy's protective stance triggered something deep in the Kethvar's genetic memory, something the architects had tried to excise but couldn't fully destroy. Dr. Yunji's hand rested on Ho-Jin's shoulder, not pulling him back but steadying him. Her dark eyes met Korthak's without flinching, even as his warriors spread out behind him in perfect killing formation. She was calculating, he realized, not how to escape, but how to shield the child with her own body when the slaughter began. You're Kethvar, she said quietly, her voice carrying an odd note of recognition. The bioengineered soldiers created by the architects. Veltar's claws scraped against her weapon's stock. How does the human know our origins? Because, Dr. Yunji continued, slowly reaching toward her research console while keeping her movements non-threatening, I've been studying your genetics for the past 3 years, specifically the genetic degradation that's killing your species. Every Kethvar in the room went perfectly still. The slow death was their most closely guarded secret, a built-in obsolescence that the architects had embedded in their DNA to ensure their weapons wouldn't outlive their usefulness. Cellular breakdown. Accelerated after the 20th year of life, leading to organ failure and neural decay. Most Kethvar died before seeing their 40th cycle. Impossible, Drakvin snarled from the doorway. No outsider knows of the fading. Dr. Yunji's fingers found her tablet, and she slowly turned it toward them. The screen displayed complex, genetic sequences, protein chains, and cellular models that even Korthak's enhanced intellect recognized as accurate. More than accurate. Revolutionary. Your creators built you to die, she said simply. But they made one mistake. They couldn't completely remove the protective instincts that exist in all higher-order species. Those instincts are triggered by... She looked down at Ho-Jin, who still stood guard despite understanding nothing of the scientific discussion above his head. By innocence. By the young. By those who trust you to be better than your programming. Ho-Jin chose that moment to look up at Korthak directly. The child's eyes held no hatred, no accusation, only a heartbreaking faith that even monsters might choose mercy if asked properly. The corporate sponsors didn't hire you just to eliminate witnesses, Dr. Yunji continued, her voice gaining strength. They hired you to destroy my research because it threatens their profit margins. The treatment for genetic degradation exists. I've synthesized it. But they want to control it, sell it back to your people at prices that would bankrupt entire worlds. She gestured to her lab equipment, where biosynthesis chambers hummed with active cultures. I was preparing to broadcast the formula on open channels when you arrived. Free genetic therapy for every Kethvar in the galaxy. Your species could live normal lifespans, have children that survive to adulthood, choose purposes beyond warfare. Lies, Veltar hissed, but uncertainty colored her harmonic undertones. Dr. Yunji pulled up another screen. Mortality statistics, population projections, and biological models that painted a stark picture. The Kethvar were dying out. Within 50 standard years, their species would be extinct. The corporate clients who employed them knew this, counted on it, preferred weapons that disposed of themselves. "I don't expect you to trust me," the doctor said, "but I'm asking you to trust him." She nodded toward Ho-Jin, who had remained perfectly still throughout the exchange. "He sees you as protectors, not destroyers. Maybe that's what you were meant to be before the architects rewrote your genetics." Korthak felt the strange internal sensation intensify until it had a name. Recognition. The child's protective stance wasn't alien. It was familiar. It was how he should feel when facing threats to the innocent. How he would feel if his programming allowed it. A proximity alarm shrieked through the station's communication system. Veltar's enhanced hearing parsed the incoming transmission. "Research Station Omega-7. This is Corporate Security Fleet Designation. Alpha. Surrender all assets and prepare for boarding. Resistance will be met with terminal force." Through the lab's viewport, energy signatures blazed to life as 3 armed vessels emerged from hyperspace. "Military grade," Korthak noted automatically. "Enough firepower to reduce the station to component atoms." "They're not here to collect evidence," Dr. Yunji realized, her face paling. "They're here to eliminate it, along with everyone who might have seen it, including us," Drakvin observed with professional calm. Kethavar mercenaries were valuable, but not more valuable than corporate secrets. Ho-Jin looked up at Korthak again, and this time his small hand reached out to touch the warrior's scaled forearm. The contact sent an electric shock through the Kethavar's nervous system, not painful but transformative, like a genetic switch being thrown after decades of dormancy. "Will you help us?" the child asked simply. For the first time in his engineered existence, Korthak understood what choice meant. He could complete his original mission, kill the witnesses, destroy the research, collect payment from employers who planned to eliminate him anyway. Or he could choose a different path entirely. He looked at his warriors, seeing his own confusion reflected in their predatory features. They were weapons, bred for killing, but they were also living beings capable of growth, change, and perhaps even redemption. The corporate fleet powered their weapons, preparing to dock. Korthak made his decision. "Today we do not hunt," Korthak announced, his harmonic voice carrying a resonance his warriors had never heard before. "Today we defend." The words sent ripples of confusion through the pack's neural network. Veltar's claws extended reflexively, her combat instincts warring with the unprecedented command. Drakvin tilted his massive head, processing the concept like a foreign language. "Captain." Morketh stepped forward, his scarred hide telling the story of 100 successful kills. "The mission parameters have changed." Korthak knelt until he was eye level with Ho-Jin, the child's unwavering trust cutting through 40 years of genetic conditioning. "Dr. Yunji, how long do you need to complete the broadcast?" She frantically calculated, fingers dancing across her research console. 15 minutes to compile the final synthesis protocols. Another 5 to push it through the galactic communication grid with enough redundancy that it can't be suppressed. 20 minutes. Veltar's tactical analysis kicked in automatically. "Corporate boarding craft will reach us in 12. They'll breach the station's hull in 14. Through the viewport, the 3 corporate vessels maneuvered into attack formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a small city, crewed by military-grade security forces equipped with the latest weapons technology. The Bloodfang was outnumbered, outgunned, and operating in their enemy's preferred tactical environment. By any reasonable analysis, they were all dead. "Sir," Drakvin's voice carried the weight of their shared history. "We are warriors, not guardians. We know only how to kill. Then we kill those who would harm the defenseless," Korthak replied, rising to his full height. The strange sensation in his chest had crystallized into something he'd never experienced: purpose beyond violence. "Transform this station into a fortress. Use every tactical advantage our nature provides." Dr. Yunji stared at them in amazement as the Kethavar warriors suddenly moved with coordinated precision, not to destroy but to protect. Veltar began analyzing structural weak points that could be reinforced rather than exploited. Morketh and his team scattered throughout the station, setting defensive positions instead of ambush points. Why? Dr. Yunji whispered to Korthak, as her synthesis equipment hummed to life. Why choose us over your own survival? Korthak watched Hojin carefully organizing medical supplies, tiny hands making sure bandages and stimulants were within easy reach for the coming battle. The child understood they were about to fight for their lives, but instead of hiding, he was trying to help. Because, the Kethvar captain said slowly, he reminded us what we could have been. The first corporate boarding pods launched, streaking toward the station like metallic meteors. Korthak's enhanced senses tracked their trajectory while his tactical mind calculated angles of approach, breach points, and optimal defensive responses. Veltar, SEAL Section 7 through 12. Force them through the main corridors. His claws extended as genetic memory and learned experience merged into something new, protective instinct guided by predatory skill. Drakfin, you and Morketh, hold the junction points, make them pay for every meter. What about you, sir? Veltar asked. I stay here. Final line of defense. He looked at Dr. Yunji, whose hands flew across her controls as genetic sequences aligned and viral delivery. Systems activated. If they reach this lab, they reach her. That cannot happen. The first impact shuddered through the station's hull. Corporate security forces began cutting through reinforced barriers with industrial plasma torches. Through the neural link, Korthak felt his warriors' positions like points of light in his consciousness, 12 souls who had chosen honor over survival. Dr. Yunji, Hojin called from his position near the emergency medical kit. The bad people are coming, aren't they? She paused in her work, looking at the child who had somehow convinced a pack of engineered killers to become protectors. Yes, sweetheart, but we have guardians now. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the station's corridors. Corporate forces had breached the outer sections and met the first line of Kethvar defense. Korthak felt Drakfin's satisfaction pulse through their link as the veteran warrior eliminated an entire boarding team with surgical precision. But satisfaction turned to concern, as tactical displays showed the true scope of their opposition. 40 corporate soldiers in powered armor, equipped with heavy weapons and supported by ship-based artillery. The Kethvar were individually superior, but mathematics remained unforgiving. First synthesis complete, Dr. Yunji announced, her voice tight with concentration. Beginning viral upload to communication networks. An explosion rocked the station as corporate forces blasted through a secondary bulkhead. Through the neural link, Korthak felt Morketh's pain spike as shrapnel tore through his shoulder armor. The warrior's response was immediate and savage, claws finding gaps in enemy protection, enhanced strength turning their own weapons against them, but they were being overwhelmed. Sir, Veltar's voice carried both pride and resignation. We cannot hold all approaches. They will reach the intersections within 7 minutes. Then we make our stand here, Korthak replied. He moved to the lab's main entrance, his massive frame filling the doorway. Behind him, Dr. Yunji worked frantically while Hojin organized, supplies with the focused determination of someone much older than his years. The sounds of battle grew closer. Through security feeds, Korthak watched his warriors fight with unprecedented ferocity. Not the cold efficiency of bred killers, but the desperate fury of protectors facing overwhelming odds. They were dying to buy time for a human child, and a scientist who had offered them salvation, without asking for anything in return. Upload at 60%, Dr. Yunji called. The formula is propagating through the galactic network, but they could still stop it if the lights went out as corporate forces cut the station's main power grid. Emergency illumination cast. Everything in hellish red shadows, and Korthak's enhanced vision showed him the first corporate soldiers advancing down the final corridor. Behind him, Hojin's small hand found his scaled forearm again. Thank you, the child whispered. Korthak felt something inside his chest expand, warm, protective, and utterly alien to his programming. For the first time, he understood what the architects had tried to steal from his species. He understood love. The first corporate soldier to round the corner died before he could raise his weapon. Korthak's claws, evolved for killing, found new purpose in protection as he turned the narrow corridor into a charnel house. Behind him, Dr. Yunji's fingers flew across her controls, while upload progress crept toward completion. 75%, she called over the sound of weapons fire. Emergency power flickered, casting dancing shadows as Korthak held the choke point against impossible odds. Through the neural link, he felt his warrior's final moments like stars going dark. Drakvin's defiant roar cut short as plasma fire overwhelmed his position. Morketh's satisfaction as he triggered an improvised explosive, taking 12 corporate soldiers with him into death. One by one, the lights in Korthak's consciousness faded. But each death bought precious seconds. Veltar's voice whispered through their shared connection, her position overrun, but her spirit unbroken. For the small Guardian captain, we chose, well, 85%, Dr. Yunji announced, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked. The genetic therapy formula propagated through galactic networks, replicating faster than corporate forces could suppress it. In a few more minutes, every Kethvar settlement would have access to the cure. If they lived that long, corporate forces regrouped in the corridor, preparing for a coordinated assault. Korthak's enhanced hearing caught their tactical chatter. They knew they faced the last defender, wounded and exhausted from holding an impossible position. They would overwhelm him through sheer numbers. Dr. Yunji, Ho-Jin's voice was remarkably steady for someone his age. Will the medicine help all the Kethvar people? Yes, sweetheart, every single one. Good. The child moved closer to Korthak, his small presence somehow making the massive warrior feel stronger rather than more burdened. That's what Guardians do, right? They help people. Korthak felt moisture in his eyes, another impossible sensation for a creature bred without tear ducts. The genetic modifications Dr. Yunji described were already taking effect, unlocking emotional responses the architects had tried to eliminate. 92%, she called. Almost there. The corporate assault came like a storm. Energy weapons lit the corridor in deadly strobes while Korthak moved with fluid grace, his enhanced reflexes turning him into a blur of scales and claws. But there were too many of them, and his body bore the accumulated damage of holding an unwinnable position. Plasma fire seared through his shoulder armor. A force blade opened a gash across his ribs. He stumbled, caught himself, and kept fighting because behind him a human child believed in his ability to protect. 97%. Dr. Yunji's voice carried desperate hope. The upload is propagating through the last network nodes. Corporate soldiers pushed past Korthak's weakening defense, energy weapons trained on the biolab. In seconds, they would destroy the research station and execute the survivors. Ho-Jin stepped forward, placing himself between the soldiers and Dr. Yunji. Please don't hurt her, the child said simply. She's trying to save people. One soldier hesitated, just for a moment, at the sight of a small boy facing death without flinching. It was enough. Korthak's final surge of strength came not from genetic enhancement or combat training, but from something far more powerful. The protective instinct that the architects couldn't fully suppress exploded through his nervous system like wildfire. He moved with impossible speed, claws finding vital points with surgical precision. When the violence ended, 6 corporate soldiers lay dead, and Korthak knelt in spreading pools of his own blood. His enhanced healing was failing, cellular damage, accumulating faster than his body could repair. 100%, Dr. Yunji whispered, her voice filled with wonder. It's done. The formula is distributed across the galactic network, every Kethvar settlement, every military base, every research facility. They all have access now. Through failing vision, Korthak saw Ho-Jin approach with careful steps. The child's small hands pressed against the warrior's scaled cheek, offering comfort without fear. Thank you, Ho-Jin said softly. You kept your promise. The evacuation pod, Korthak managed, his voice barely a whisper. In the emergency bay. Get her. Get him to safety. Dr. Yunji knelt beside them both, tears streaming down her face. You saved your entire species. You saved us all. No. Korthak's golden eyes focused on Ho-Jin's face one last time. He saved us, reminded us what we could choose to be. The station shuddered as corporate ships prepared to destroy all evidence of their failure. But it was too late. The genetic therapy had propagated beyond their ability to suppress. Across the galaxy, HFY warriors were receiving the cure for their species-engineered death sentence. The pod, Korthak repeated with his final breath. Protect. The small guardian. 20 years later, Dr. Ho Jin Chen stood before the memorial wall on New Kethvar, the first civilian settlement his species had established since their liberation from corporate control. The bioluminescent panels displayed the names of 12 warriors who had chosen death over duty, protection over programming. At the center of the memorial, a holographic image cycled through moments from that final battle. Dr. Yunji working, frantically at her console, a small boy standing protectively before adults, and Kethvar warriors discovering what it meant to guard rather than destroy. Dr. Chen, the voice behind him carried the harmonic undertones that still made humans pause in primitive recognition. But where once those tones spoke of death, now they conveyed respect. The ceremony is ready to begin. Ho-Jin turned to face Commander Veltar, no longer the lean killer who had breached Research Station Omega-7, but a scarred veteran who had dedicated her extended life to protecting refugee settlements across the galaxy. The genetic therapy had granted the Kethvar not just longer lifespans, but the emotional capacity to choose their own purposes. Many chose protection. Thank you, Commander. I know Captain Korthak would be proud of what you've built here. Veltar's golden eyes, softened by 2 decades of choices beyond violence, studied the memorial. He knew even then. The change had already begun when the small guardian looked at us without fear. They walked together toward the settlement's central plaza, where hundreds of beings had gathered for the annual Choosing Day celebration. Humans worked alongside Kethvar in perfect cooperation, their children playing together without the species barriers that had once seemed absolute. Dr. Yunji, now elderly but still sharp, supervised medical students, both human and Kethvar, in advanced genetic therapy techniques. The latest reports? Ho-Jin asked as they walked. Remarkable. The therapy has eliminated genetic degradation in 97% of our population. Birth rates have stabilized, and our children are showing emotional development that surpasses even human norms. Veltar paused beside a playground, where Kethvar younglings carefully helped human children reach high climbing structures. We are becoming what the architects feared, weapons that chose to become guardians. Ho-Jin smiled, remembering the moment that had changed everything. A frightened 8-year-old boy stepping between danger and innocence, trusting that even monsters might choose mercy if asked properly. The memorial ceremony began with traditional Kethvar harmonics, but instead of death songs they sang of protection, sacrifice, and the choice to be better than one's nature. Human voices joined the alien chorus, creating something entirely new. Citizens of New Kethvar, Ho-Jin addressed the gathered crowd, his voice carrying clearly across the plaza. We gather today to remember 12 warriors who discovered that the greatest strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to preserve. He gestured to the memorial, where the names glowed softly in both human script and Kethvar symbols. Captain Korthak and his pack faced an impossible decision. They could complete their mission as programmed weapons, or they could choose to become something their creators never intended, protectors of the innocent. A small Kethvar child raised her hand, her scales still showing the soft patterns of youth. Dr. Chen, why did they choose to save you instead of themselves? Ho-Jin knelt to her eye level, seeing in her curious expression the same trust he had shown Korthak decades earlier. Because they remembered something very important, that what we are born to be doesn't have to define what we choose to become. The architects created us as disposable weapons, Commander Veltar added, her harmonic voice carrying across the plaza. They built us to kill efficiently and die quietly, but they couldn't eliminate the protective instincts that exist in all sentient life. Dr. Chen awakened those instincts, and Dr. Yunji gave us the tools to survive their awakening. The ceremony continued with readings from the research logs that had started it all. Dr. Yunji's original notes about Kethvar genetics, her desperate work to save both her research and their lives, and the moment she realized that her captors had become their protectors. As the sun set over New Kethvar, Ho-Jin found himself standing again before the memorial. The holographic display showed the final moment, Korthak kneeling in the research lab, his massive frame protecting a small human child who had trusted him to make the right choice. "You kept your promise, Captain," Ho-Jin whispered to the image. "Your people are free. They're protectors now, not weapons. They chose to live up to the trust a frightened child placed in them." Behind him, the sounds of the settlement painted a picture of the future Korthak had died to protect. Human and Kethvar families sharing evening meals, children of both species learning together in integrated schools. Medical researchers working side by side to heal rather than harm. The galaxy had learned something profound that day, on Research Station Omega-7. Sometimes the most dangerous predators could become the most dedicated guardians. Sometimes weapons could choose to become shields. Sometimes monsters could decide to become heroes. All it took was one small act of trust from someone who believed they could be better than their programming.